A warm welcome to everyone who is here this evening, especially to alumni and to parents of our boys who are setting up in the hallway out there. We're indebted to Greg Malkin and his staff for organizing this special event, and certainly to all our talented young men who you'll see and support, I hope, very shortly at that young entrepreneurial market. One of the ways I think University School has been distinctive over the years is it's been its emphasis on boys as makers. It began in 1990, and it's continued on both the Shaker and Hunting Valley campuses today. Throughout its history, U.S. has encouraged boys to work with their hands as well as with their minds. And the Young Entrepreneurial Institute is one of the many examples of our desire to cultivate that maker spirit in our young men. Another example is that next fall, we are opening an 1,100 square foot innovation room on the Shaker campus that will be an exciting part of the maker experience for our boys. Our mission is explicit in our desire to promote a dedicated faculty, a rigorous curriculum, and entrepreneurial experiential programs that foster intellectual, physical, creative, and moral excellence. Our goals are vital in competing in a global and technological world. And our future curricular initiative that you have heard was announced recently continues to support this important aspect of the University School program. Another outstanding aspect of the Young Entrepreneurial Institute is something Greg just mentioned. Think about the number of students who were here today from other schools and how this civic engagement brings students and schools and other institutions throughout Northeast Ohio and the opportunity to meet successful and talented people like John Kaplan. Thank you, John, for being here today and tonight. He's one of the many talented alumni who serve as a bright example to our students, and I take pleasure in welcoming back to the school you graduated from in 1991. Right outside this theater is a banner with John's picture on it. And it says, I look at it every day when I go into my office, it says, "We look for people who are tinkerers. I want my kids to work with their hands and experiment with stuff. The world needs more doers." So, John, I want you to know I strive each day to remember that advice and be a doer. So thank you all for being here tonight. I look forward to hearing John's remarks, and I look forward to enjoying our young men out there. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rick. And yeah, I didn't mention when I talked about all those students were from 20 different area middle school and high school students from all over Northeast Ohio. We had kids from Lorain, we had kids from Youngstown, really all over. Before I introduce Mr. Kaplan, I do have to do a few thank yous. First of all, a very special thank you to the Burton D. Morgan Foundation, which is making Northeast Ohio really a global model of entrepreneurial thinking and the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And particularly, I'm very much involved in the youth entrepreneurship ecosystem. And Northeast Ohio, you may not know, has a reputation as having one of the most robust, if not the most robust, youth entrepreneurship ecosystem in the world. And at the center of that, and really as a leader of that, I'm very happy actually to have here the president of the Burton D. Morgan Foundation, Deb Hoover, who's a real visionary for that. So thank you, Deb. But the real person I have to thank is Burt Morgan. Burt Morgan was a Clevelander, Northeast Ohio, and very successful entrepreneur, started or helped start actually hundreds of businesses, and really had the vision and the generosity to give back to our region in such a huge way, and endowed this foundation with the idea of championing the entrepreneurial spirit. And it is through his endowment and through the work of Deb Hoover and her team that so much wonderful things happen in the entrepreneurial space in Cleveland. I also want to thank the many companies that help provide additional support to make this evening possible. Your program has information about those companies. Again, they're also helping make Northeast Ohio a great place for entrepreneurs and supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs. Also supporting this event is the Young Entrepreneur Institute, of which I'm the director. We offer a range of activities in the region for students and teachers in grades K through 12. So we focus on youth entrepreneurship, not just at university school, but this year we will help touch close to 10,000 students and 200 to 300 schools in the region. There are two key people who made this evening really special and work. Rika Parabas is the director of the Young Entrepreneur Market, so she's the one who organized that wonderful fair out there. She's worked with the middle school boys for the last 8 weeks, something like that, to get them ready. And also there are some students from other area schools as well and organizations, and I hope you support them. So after tonight's presentation, I hope you will be generous as well and open your wallets and your hearts as you leave the auditorium. For a number of these boys, this is their first entrepreneurial experience, and you could be their first customer. So make that first experience a wonderful experience and a generous experience. Then this entire event really is a team effort for my entire team at the Young Entrepreneur Institute, but every team needs a leader, and Mary Schoen is the project manager for this event, and she's been working all year on all aspects, and you can imagine it's pretty complicated having 20 schools and the buses and the kids and the fair and everything. So I want to say a very special thanks to Mary, and she is actually outside the auditorium working, but if we can give her a big round of applause. So at this point, I'm very excited to introduce our distinguished speaker. He's a 91 grad of University School and is currently the head of global sales at Pinterest. He oversees all aspects of the company's global sales and operations organization, working with big and small clients, agencies, technology partners, really anything that touches the Pinterest advertising business. Prior to that, Mr. Kaplan spent 12 years at Google. That's a long time in the life of Google. It hasn't existed for much longer than that. And was most recently their vice president in charge of US sales. And before that, he's got a really interesting background, which we'll talk about. He was one of the first business hires for The Economist magazine, starting their website, economist.com. And he also worked for the PGA, Professional Golfing Association, and was a players rep, sort of like a Jerry Maguire kind of person, for SFX Sports. After US, he graduated from Ohio Wesleyan University. So please welcome John Kaplan.
So good evening. It's great to be here with you tonight. I'm really excited. I had a great day with the students. I think I managed to keep most of them awake during the course of my presentation, which is an accomplishment. But I'm excited to talk to you tonight about what I talked to them about, which is really the journey that I've been on and some of the great experiences that I've had to learn and to grow at two of the most important companies, or two of the best companies that I think I've had a chance to learn from, and then some of the lessons that I've learned along the way that I share with the team today. But before I start, I did take an opportunity, now that I'm coming back to this school, to look back at my pictures from when I was here, and looked at what I looked like back then, and well, this is kind of what it started with. Here's the kid back in the day, great head of hair on him. But if you walk through the hallways of the school here, you might actually see pictures of me. I was on the hockey team, so you might actually see pictures of me with long hair. Somehow, I made the decision that was going to be a great choice. And I have to say, on some people that might look good, but on me, it looked more like this. Now you'll notice there's not an actual picture of me because we were going through this last night. My parents are here, and they can tell you that we went through all the pictures last night and could not find it. And I am convinced that they had some ceremony to burn every shred of evidence that I ever had long hair. I suppose if I wanted to do it today, really not an option. However, I guess I could look like this. That's for the kids today. That was called a skullet, by the way, the skull mullet. So anyways, thrilled to be here, and again, thrilled to be talking to you about my personal journey, and again, some of the really incredible experiences that I've had the chance to be a part of. And I like to start with just my life path. I do this with my team, and I think it's a really great way of kind of talking about the journey that we've all been on as we go through our careers and life. And as Greg mentioned, my career, or my life started at Shaker, actually. I spent most of my elementary school years there and came to US in 9th grade. And I'm really thankful for this school for two reasons, really, that I have some of my best friends still coming from my experience at this school, as well as the way in which I was taught to prepare and study. And I've always taken that through to college, as well as to my professional career. Is every single day, every meeting is a way in which you prepare. And I think this school really prepared me to be prepared in that way. So I went from here to Ohio Wesleyan. As you all know, it's the Harvard of the Midwest, and had a great experience there. And as any successful college student does after they finish school, they come back and they be a waiter, which is exactly what I did at Johnny's Downtown. I think that's still here, right? I may have waited on some of you at some point in the past, but it was a great experience. I think everybody actually should, every kid should have to be a waiter at some point in their life to learn how to serve and how to be good to people. But I also thought I was going to go into the physical therapy business or occupation. And I think pretty quickly after I got back here and started doing some more studying and doing more internships, I realized that I was actually interested in the business of sports. And to be really successful, I thought that you had to go to the program that studied sports administration, that prepared people to be in the front office of sports leagues and college administrators for sports. And so I did two internships, one at the University of Louisville and one at the PGA of America, to try to get into Ohio University, which has the best sports administration program in the country. And thankfully I did, which was a great experience. And I went to New York and worked for a company called SFX. Some of you may know them. They kind of formed to be a competitor to IMG to represent athletes in both playing contracts and endorsement contracts, among other things. And so I worked there and I represented some of the athletes, and people look at it and say, wow, that's Jerry Maguire, that must be the experience. And that's not exactly how it worked there, I should say. That I got there and I think I was given the 7th round draft pick for the Jets to go get a car deal. He wanted to get a car lease. And I found myself calling now there was no guarantee this guy was going to even make the team. And found myself calling every car dealership in the state of New Jersey, offering this person to go do football signings in exchange for a car lease for a year. And at some point I was like, this really isn't what I signed up for, and I think I need to go find a different thing, because I love playing sports, but I didn't think I wanted to actually work in sports. And this was in New York in 1999, and as you all probably remember, it was pretty heady times for the internet in New York in particular. As well as San Francisco, and I had this serendipitous, opportunity to meet the CEO and publisher of The Economist, and they were starting Economist.com for the very first time. Didn't have a website, didn't have a business model or anything like that. So I had a really great opportunity, and I would say they took a huge chance on me to go build up this business, because frankly, nobody had internet experience back at that time. So I had the opportunity to go to the Economist to build that up. About 4 years later, I started losing all this business to this company called Google. And again, I met somebody at a conference in 2003 and was so compelled by the opportunity there that I left The Economist and went and came to Google in late 2003. I was there for 12 years and had a great experience. And then just a year ago, went over to Pinterest to run global sales. So really, I think all of these were kind of formidable in my path But Google, I wanted to share with you just some of the more detailed experiences of my time at Google and at Pinterest specifically, because I think there's just really a lot to learn about entrepreneurship and innovation from these two companies, and a little bit more about what I share with them today. It starts at Google, and this was Google back in 2003. For some reason, we thought that the exclamation point was important. I guess Yahoo had the exclamation point back then, so we just copied them. But Google, if you think about it, Google, there was actually a lot of search engines back then, Yahoo being one of them. There were a bunch of them that some of you may remember. But Google just built a better mousetrap. They built a better system that was more relevant, more fast, and it literally got you the better information. And you think back to that time, actually the access to information was not ubiquitous. You didn't have this device with you all the time. And so the ability to access the kind of information that Google was providing was something that was actually pretty important. I joined the company, it was about 1,000 people. Today it's about 100,000 people. And I joined at about 500 million in revenue, which I thought was astronomical compared to my experience at The Economist. And today they're approaching 100 billion in revenue. So it's been an incredible thing to witness over the last couple of years. But really, the anchoring point is about this technological innovation in the access of information. And from this kind of basic concept of search, which became a really big business, we acquired YouTube, which you may know Google owns YouTube as well. And it fit in the same mold, right? Access to information, but more information was becoming in the form of video. And there were a couple trends that made this actually a really attractive acquisition for the company. First is that there was this kind of trend of the democratization of content, meaning that everybody now had a phone that had a video camera on it, right? Before the iPhone came out, all of us were walking around with big Sony Handycams. And now you had this ability for anybody to take any piece of content and make it part of this platform. And so this migration from kind of very produced TV-like content to user-generated content really started when YouTube took off. And that was the first phase of this, or the first major trend. The second was ubiquitous internet access. Again, try watching YouTube, on a 3G or less network, and it's almost impossible, right? It's frustrating. So when the internet access became something that was as ubiquitous and as fast as it is today, that's when YouTube really took off. And for the advertising landscape, what was interesting to see was this has been happening over the last couple of years, is this migration from people watching television to watching on demand, either YouTube, Hulu, Netflix, or on demand in other forms, like in TV, but not live. And so as an advertiser, one of the big challenges they have is that people aren't watching television at the same rate they were previously. So how do they reach those audiences? And these new platforms like YouTube, Hulu, and others are emerging as the place where they can actually find the audiences who are watching that content. So now this is I've been gone for a year, but probably an $8 to $10 billion business for Google, which is really quite incredible to see over the course of 5 or 6 years. So this is the kind of second phase of the company in this mission and monetization. The third, I think, that was really important for Google was the advent of the mobile phone and Android specifically. And it's important to kind of think back to all the different computing cycles that we have gone through and what prompted this computing cycle. If you think back to the 50s and 60s, that's when mainframe computers were all the rage, and a computer of this room size could do a fraction of what a cell phone can do today. And I would say, that lasted through the 70s, and then in the 80s and 90s is the era of the personal computer, this notion that everybody could have a computer at your home. That was pretty revolutionary for the time, but that became the status quo. And in fact, we started to have computers that were more portable, laptops, things like that. it really wasn't, now BlackBerry was around in 2000 and Nokia was around in 2000, but it really wasn't until the iPhone launched that the kind of third phase, if you will, of the computing cycle has emerged, and the mobile computing cycle being that. What's interesting is if you look back to before the iPhone, the predominant mobile operating systems were from two companies, Nokia and Microsoft. They had about 80% share of the mobile operating system market worldwide. If you fast forward to Q4 of last year, and now Nokia is no longer. Microsoft has pretty much given up with their Windows platform, and now Android and iPhone are 95% of the market. BlackBerry is practically gone. And that's happened over the course of only 9-10 years, that this cycle has totally changed. And this has changed Google's business really dramatically as well. Now about 2/3 of Google's total business is coming through mobile devices as opposed to the laptop. So that was a total transformation for our business to have to kind of take an enormous desktop-based business in every way and transform it to this emerging way in which people were searching for information and finding information. So this is the third thing that I think was really important in our evolution. The fourth that may be less interesting or exciting to this group is an acquisition called DoubleClick, which I'm sure you're not familiar with, but we basically ran ads across the entire web, so I'm sorry. But if the New York Times is running an ad or CNN, it was probably most probably sold and served by us. And that's part of what Google has been so successful in doing, is not just selling on Google, but selling across the entire ecosystem. I say this because this was kind of the evolution of my time there. Each one of these were a major build. I didn't know anything about television advertising, but at the end of the day, with YouTube's emergence, I had to figure out how you sell against television. Because that's where the viewership was changing, how the viewership was changing. Mobile, nobody knew how we were going to migrate our desktop search business to mobile and how we were going to have it be performing in the same way, but a big challenge. And this was an enterprise technology play among other things. So really, that was, for me, really a part of the excitement of being at Google was the build. I enjoyed each one of those phases. But all of these, I should say, were in service of a much bigger mission at the company, and that was Larry and Sergey, our two co-founders, their mission was really to apply technology to any industry where it could be applied and where we could see transformational change in the quality of that industry or the benefit to the products that were built for that industry. And so I want to talk to you about some of those examples that I had kind of a front row seat to see, and some of the experiences along the way, because I think this is where it gets really exciting to talk about entrepreneurship and talk about innovation and how the company thought, how it continues to think in order to do these kind of things. And to do this, they set up a company within the company called Google X, which was this kind of incubator. They call it the Moonshot Factory, which was this place where anything was possible, and they could think about just applying technology to any industry and get it off the ground, incubate it, and then see if it had commercial viability. And there were a lot of these different kind of projects that were super interesting. The first I just wanted to share with you was something called Project Loon. So Project Loon was a project that was born out of the fact that 4 billion of the 7 billion people on the earth do not have internet access, which is a stunning fact, right? But the truth of the matter is most of the world does not have access to the same things that we do here in the US. And you can imagine the implications of that, the inability to start businesses, the inability to get access to simple information that would make them healthier or more educated, or obviously to be able to watch Netflix, whatever it might be, they don't have access to it. And what this project aimed to accomplish was to beam internet access down from these balloons that are floating at 60,000 feet, well above where airplanes fly. And if you have a receptor on your home, you would be able to get internet access beamed directly from this balloon. You can see a little black sphere at the bottom of this. This is where all the guts of the technology live, and this is where it beams it down. And what's interesting about this project is what they learned was that the currents, the wind currents at 60,000 feet are very consistent and very predictable about where they go and how fast they go. And so they can put balloons up in the air, and they know exactly where they're gonna fly, and they know exactly where they need balloons in order to provide coverage. So right now, today, there are thousands of balloons at 60,000 feet providing internet access to developing countries. Here in the US, we have maybe a slightly more conventional way of thinking about this, which is called Google Fiber. Is anybody familiar with this? It's not here, unfortunately, but this was a project to provide a gigabit speed access, internet access to your home. And I don't know exactly what it is here, but probably something around 50 megabytes is what it is here. So we're talking about 20x improvement in speed. This is what we had at Google, was a gigabit in our offices. So this is the fastest I've ever seen myself. And the idea was, if you can provide this kind of access to communities, imagine the kind of businesses that can form with really, really fast internet access. Again, something like Netflix would never be able to be formed without fast internet access. And the next generation of businesses are going to have to be built on much faster internet access if we're going to do some of the computational algorithms that we're creating. That's going to have to be created on top of really fast access. So this is happening now in about 15 cities across the country. The process, if they come to the city, the process is each community within the city, call it Shaker Heights or Pembroke Pike, would have to agree a certain percentage of the population would have to sign up for it, for them to start digging, because they literally dig in the streets, and they work really closely with the municipalities to do this. And they're putting super fast fiber in the streets directly into your home. So this has been a really ambitious project, and one to watch as well. Talking about ambitions and talking about expectations rising, this is a project called Project Wing. And what you see here is a drone that is delivering a package. And you probably heard Amazon talk about doing this as well. I think this is just the evolution of consumer expectations and what we all kind of expect from our online and offline shopping experiences, period. You can think back to the day when it was acceptable to get a package delivered to you in a week or two. And now it's kind of like, how is overnight not possible, right? And now it's becoming, how is in 2 hours not possible? So I think this is going to become a really important part of delivery. I think it has implications in a lot of other industries, like already being used really aggressively in agriculture, for a farmer to be able to put a camera on one of these drones and look at their crops, to understand where they need to be more precise in fertilizer and other types of farming. But this is a really ambitious project that I think, again, if you're Macy's, you're probably not going to go invest in building drones, but this could be a really important project to help the entire ecosystem deliver and do a lot of other things that are really cool. Autonomous vehicles, I had a chance to ride in one of these. Scary as everything, but really incredible as well. What you see here is a Lexus that's outfitted with Google's autonomous vehicle technology. That laser, that thing on top, is a laser that's spinning around, and it's scanning everything around you and constantly trying to understand the environment. And they programmed it to understand people who are walking in front of you. That's somebody that you should stop for. If you've gone over the white line, something that you got to go correct for. And obviously looking at all the surroundings. You also see cameras and sensors on the left and right-hand side of the car. Now this is a prototype, so this is pretty rudimentary, but this technology is going to be ubiquitous in several years. In fact, if you look at Audi or if you look at GM, Ford, they're all building their own autonomous vehicle divisions. And I think for the young folks in the audience, I think you'll be driving one of these in a couple of years, if I had to guess. I think what's amazing about this, one of our first videos showcasing this was actually of a blind man who was able to get behind the wheel for the first time in his life. And you can think about the implications for people to be able to do things they never were able to do before. This vehicle is actually Google's version. We built our own, or they built their own. Just a prototype of what it might look like. This doesn't have a steering wheel. It just has a map that you plug in the coordinates and let the thing go off on its own. That might be a little much for all of us right now, but this is where it's going. And listen, there's 35,000 traffic accident deaths a year, and I think that's what really gets people at Google, I know, excited about the possibilities of this type of technology. There's other implications, there's other things that you could do with this. They've talked, and this is kind of a grandiose idea, but you could talk about a future where if all cars are autonomous and all cars are talking to each other, then you could actually reduce the size of the lanes in the highway, because when they're talking to each other, there's no real risk of cars running into each other. The engineers call people driving cars a bug, which I thought was kind of funny. But that's the kind of grand ambition of autonomous vehicles. I think again in the next 5 to 10 years it's coming, and they're all building it. It'll look a lot better than it does today. It'll look and feel much like just an electric vehicle, that is an additional option. One of the areas I'm most excited about that I had really a front row seat in working with was in the application of technology to healthcare. And one of the really exciting projects that I had a chance to work with the team on at Google X was something called Project Iris. So what this is a contact lens that has a computer in it. And what this computer does, well, first, what they determined was that through your tears, you could monitor somebody's blood glucose levels at the same level of accuracy than, pricking your fingers 4, 8, 12 times a day. And so, and in fact, the amazing thing about this is that it would be monitoring your glucose 24/7, and all you had to do is close your eyes, and there was a little light on it that flashed red if you had too low and flashed green if you were good, which is incredible, right? For an experience for somebody who's diabetic, that's an amazing technological breakthrough for them. By the way, this is a $22 billion market as well, that we took this to Novartis, who has Alcon as their contact lens business. And Google didn't want to make contact lenses. We just wanted to license this technology. And by the way, I think there's probably a bunch of other things that we're going to be able to do in monitoring eye health, things like macular degeneration, understanding that and seeing that, before it becomes a major issue. But we took this to Novartis, and they're going to be building this. They license it, and they're going to be building this, and it's in production right now. I think it'll be, if I haven't been there for a while, but it should be in the next year or two. I would imagine that this will be out. So this should be really transformational for somebody who's a diabetic, and then just the start of what else could happen with something like this. What really got me excited as we were talking to Novartis about this, though, was something else that's really scientific and really kind of science fiction going forward, and it's this notion of something called nanoparticles. And what this technology, they are working on this right now. What this technology does is nanoparticle is a particle that they create that can be programmed to connect and only connect with certain types of cells. And so what you would do is take this pill of a bunch of nanoparticles, and these nanoparticles could be programmed to only connect to, say, cancer cells. And you could imagine the kind of things you could do once you have only nanoparticles only attached to problematic cells, like cancer cells. One idea is to create a watch that has a really powerful magnet in it. And it would literally take all of the nanoparticles and pull them to one part of the body, for instance, your wrist. So you could do really localized chemotherapy and you wouldn't destroy your whole body, right? Which would be transformational. But what really got the CEO of Novartis excited was, what if you could, as a pharmaceutical company, program the medicine to connect only to the nanoparticles that are connected to only the cancerous cells? Now, this is hard to do, and I don't claim to know how we're going to do it or how far off we are from doing that, but you could imagine cancer being handled at a cellular level, which would be totally transformational. And I guess I didn't realize it until the CEO kind of looked back and sat back in his chair and said, you realize if you're successful, this changes everything. So at that moment, I knew that this was one of the most transformational breakthroughs. They have hundreds of people at Google right now who look like they work for Pfizer, in labs, working with these types of big business problems, but they're taking a totally different approach. There was one other example where they created this pill that a couple thousand people took, and the pill essentially just monitors all of your vitals, all of your metabolic stats, and it does it always, and then reports back. These things are connected to the internet, and it reports back what normal is for you. And they went to the FDA and they said, "What are you trying to accomplish?" And they said, "What are you trying to learn?" They said, "I don't know. All I'm trying to understand is what is normal for a particular individual." Because you might walk into a doctor one day and you might have had a stressful day the day before, you might have had a big cup of coffee and your heart rate's up. But is that indicative of your true health? Instead, what if you know what normal is for you, and then when we start to see, or you start to see, your heart rate increase by 50% versus what you normally have, there would be some monitor, some alert that comes to your phone that says, "Hey, I think we got some problems, right? This has been like this for the last 3 days, and here's the best cardiologist in the local area," right? All possible, but that has already happened. That is already happening right now. People are getting monitored on a 24/7 basis for all their vitals. I think this is one of the most exciting parts of the application of technology to healthcare. How many of you guys know this? The Oculus Rift. All the young guys are raising their hand. That's good. This is the Oculus Rift. Facebook bought this company for $2 billion. I think this is going to be a really important part of the future, the next big computing system. We've talked about going from mainframes to personal computers to mobile. I think AR and VR is going to be a very important part of the future computing system for people to create applications on top of, or to create new services for. Facebook bought this. This is about $1,500 if you wanted to go buy this yourself today. Google took a little different approach. They created this, which was called Cardboard. It cost $2. We actually sent about 1 million of them out in the New York Times to showcase how you could bring reporting, virtual reality reporting from the war zone into a virtual reality experience like this. So literally just in the newspaper we send this out. This again cost $2. It was somebody just tinkering in an office one day, put it together with a bunch of pieces of cardboard, and all of a sudden we had a prototype that worked, and that sold millions of versions. And all you did was slide your phone in the back of this thing, and all the applications are what you really care about, right? So I think in the future there's going to be amazing ways for you to, for instance, get a front row seat at the Cavs game from your living room, watching it live stream into your virtual reality device, and you might be able to tap on a player while they're playing and get more information about them. It could be a really immersive experience if you think about all the applications to virtual reality and augmented reality. And I think this is going to be an exciting space to watch in the future. For anybody who's an inventor and an entrepreneur here, you should be building applications for that right now. So now I've moved over to Pinterest, and while our ambitions might be slightly smaller than Google's, I have to admit, but I think we're also really passionate about applying technology to new business problems. And for us, the value proposition for Pinterest is about people discovering great things to do in their life. It's as simple as it is. Discover ideas that you can go do. And some of those ideas might come in the real world. Some of those things might be coming because you're walking down the street and you see a great scarf on a very nice scarf. And what we just launched is something called Lens that allows you to use your camera as your search engine. So effectively, I could take a picture of this young lady's scarf, and I could get ideas from Pinterest that are similar to that scarf. Or you could imagine walking into your friend's home and loving a chair. You can take a picture of that chair, and you don't know the words to describe that. So I would say Google's probably not the best thing to use when you're walking into somebody's house and you see a great leather chair. You just know what it looks like, you know what your taste is. And so we built this thing called Lens that allows you to take a picture of red shoes and see things that look like that. Or you can walk into the grocery store, take a pictures of strawberries and get all the great recipes that match that particular item in the store. You can pick anything you want and take a picture. My shoes, your scarf, all kinds of things that are really applicable for experiences that are more visual. And we're really excited. Actually, we just announced a partnership with Samsung that this technology will be baked into the new Samsung S8 that's launching in a couple weeks. So when you go use your camera, and take a picture of something, it's going to give you the option of searching related items on Pinterest, which should be really, really cool. This is also a really cool image recognition technology that we've built as well. So any image can now become shoppable, where you pick each one of these different products within an image, and you can go explore and even buy that product. I'll just do that again so you can see. You can see I hit that little thing, and there's a lamp, and you see on the bottom all the visual searches that match that. Pictures, a couch, and a pillow. And so again, in the future, I think that for a lot of things that are more visual in nature, this kind of platform where you need to see it and you need to understand your personal taste, I think this is going to be the new search engine for some people and some use cases. So I shared with the kids this morning just kind of 4 lessons learned, and I'll wrap up with a quick video. But the first is, these are the lessons that I've learned from just watching the leaders and these incredible innovators at both of these companies. And the first is this power of why or why not. And this is what everybody who I've observed who has built something meaningful has been asking themselves. Why can't we do that? What is stopping us? And the power of yes and building on people's ideas is something that I just see happen so often. Yes, we should build a contact lens. You know what it should do? It should monitor glucose, because I bet we can do this. And that's how these things get started. And I just really noticed this spirit of yes, and questioning every reason why they couldn't do something as a guiding principle. The second thing I say is that diversity is a gift, and so is being a little weird. Diversity, Pinterest and Google both really valued diversity, and not for diversity's sake, but not only for diversity's sake, but also because it made our products better. When we're talking about trying to reach billions of people across the world, you can't build a product without a diverse workforce that understands the needs and cultural differences of different people. So I've seen the best teams, and I encourage the kids this morning to create teams of diverse individuals, because you're going to come out with a better product that's going to be more applicable to more people. Thus, you're going to build a much bigger company. And the weird thing, listen, if I reflect on the people who are doing this kind of stuff, they're a little off, but they're the most interesting people in the world to talk to, because they just have so many ideas. And I just think back to people in high school and college who were just always kind of a little crazy, but in a good way. And I'd probably seek them out now if I could, because those are the people who are going to do something special. The third thing that I really observed, which is special, that was really special to Google and also to Pinterest, is this notion of celebrating failure. I think as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, if you think you're building something and that is going to be the end product, I'm sure many of you have had this experience, that's never the case. And so what I saw Google do is get people up every Friday at our TGIF, and it was in front of the whole company, and they talk about a product they killed and why they did it and what they learned, and from there, where they're taking the project. Because inevitably, there was one thing or two things that they found from that project that were incredible, that they're going to go build upon and make the next project the thing that actually does hit it. But I think in these cultures, if they don't celebrate failure, or if you try to sweep it under the rug, or the worst case, punish it or penalize it, it really does stymie innovation. And you might have just stymied the thing that's going to be the next big thing. So I think it's been amazing to see how that's just permeated the culture. And then finally, this is kind of Larry Page's saying is, in all of these ideas, you must think 10x, not 10%. Everybody in the world is thinking about the next 10%. Your opportunity is to think about how you can transformationally change, not incrementally change. It just isn't enough for us to be growing a business or a new idea by 10%. That's not transformational enough. So that's always the bar that he holds. And when we start talking about the commercialization of this, it's whether this thing could actually be a 10x improvement for the consumer, and therefore an opportunity to make a huge business. And why would you do that? I mean, first of all, you're going to attract the best people. You're going to attract people who want to work on these really, really big projects. The second thing is that there's no competition. Like, nobody else is doing this. Nobody else is thinking about, contact lenses like that or nanoparticles. So you've got very little competition. And the third is, if you're successful, there's huge business rewards for that. And so that's why that culture has really permeated Google and as well Pinterest. I wanted to share with you a quick video to wrap up, just bringing together all of these themes and bringing together this notion of moonshot thinking. So enjoy.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there.
There's so many challenges in the world, and you could feel daunted by that, and sort of oppressed by that, or you kind of say, how might we think differently about this?
Everyone else in the world is working on that next 10%. If you can be the one that delivers that 10 times improvement, you have a chance to really change things.
If you want cars to run at 50 miles per gallon, fine, you can retool your car a little bit. But if I tell you it has to run on a gallon of gas for 500 miles, you have to start over.
You need a lot of courage in this work, and you need a lot of persistence. One of the things that's really critical is not only having the courage to keep trying every day or thinking big, even if you don't really 100% believe it's possible, like you might think this might be possible, have the courage to try. That's how the greatest things have happened.
You don't spend your time being bothered that you can't teleport from here to Japan, because there's a part of you that thinks it's impossible. Moonshot thinking is choosing to be bothered by that.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Humanity's progress has been a series of amazing, audacious things, from the very small and personal up to the great, big, and grand. And we are a species of moonshots. And to me, that's like the really amazing, poetic, and inspirational thing.
I think our ambitions are a glass ceiling on what we can accomplish.
When you find your passion, you're unstoppable. You can make amazing things happen. It's been true through all of history.
I believe in the human spirit, and I believe that there are always going to be crazy people who will get out of bed one morning and say, you know what? I think I can build a space elevator, and let's go and do it. But I think that if we become afraid to take these great big risks, we stop inspiring people. We stop achieving things. And the biggest nightmare scenario is that we won't have what it takes to solve the really big challenges.
Thank you very much. I think we have a few minutes for questions. Okay, about 10 minutes for questions if anybody has any.
Can you talk about at Google, within that Google X group, how you brought about the moonshot thinking, how the company went through the prioritization of the various ideas that came out, and then how that process?
Yeah. I have to admit that I wasn't a part of the Google X team until they needed my help in the commercialization of their products. So I have to admit I wasn't really a part of the idea generation as much. But what I understand to be the case was a very intense group of people throwing problems out on a table and everybody just intensely debating it. And one of the rules that I understood them to have was this notion of like yes and how do you build on somebody's idea? And then at the very end, they'd poke a bunch of holes in it. They'd ask, what could go wrong? And then one of the guiding principles of any project that did get funded was it had to be commercially viable within a decade. And so those were some of the guardrails. And then the question is, how much is it going to cost? And I think there's more financial discipline now than ever in the company, and I think that's something that's a really important lens that they're looking at as well. But at the end of the day, that process of somebody coming up with a great idea, people building on that, then breaking it down, and then rapid prototyping it, getting it out in the market, getting feedback, and then figuring out whether or not it's really commercially viable. Yes?
Do you start out with a project on the basis of it'll generate revenue, or that on the basis it's a great idea?
The latter. Again, it has to have some path to commercial viability, but the idea itself is what is celebrated and is what they're looking for. So there's a lot of instances where we're not exactly sure how we're going to make money on this, but there's enough ideas, enough ways in which it's happened in the past that we have a pretty good idea that there's going to be a way to do it if we just make this something big and meaningful. So it always started with the idea. Yes?
Thanks for doing it. Sure, it's a great experience for the boys. I guess my question is whether it's at Google or at Pinterest. Frankly, I'm interested to see if it came up in any of your discussions with the boys today. How do great, innovative companies manage responsibility in innovation? And so, what's good innovation, what's bad innovation, while at the same time encouraging the notion of innovation?
It's a great question. It was about the responsibility, the corporate responsibility we have for innovation, and I would maybe expand that to say technology more broadly, because technology is not always good. And one of the first questions I got today, which was, by the way, they're all sitting there looking terribly bored, and then they have the most amazing questions, which was great. And this wasn't all just U.S. boys, but the first question I got was, do you think robots are going to take more people's jobs, and how should we think about that? And I was like, wow, this is pretty deep. And the answer is, it's a really tough question. And I think that in that case, the way I answered that to that boy was to say, yeah, I think it is going to happen. It already has happened in a lot of industries and manufacturing and so forth. I think it's going to happen even more. And so we can either fight that, or we can retool our workforce to adjust to the new reality. And I think the good news is that if we do this right, there's going to be really great paying jobs for people who are running these robots and maintaining these robots. But I think your question was also around the ethical considerations. And again, I think there's a lot of things that I don't have the answer for, to be honest with you, but I think there's going to have to be a lot more discussion about, is this good technology? Is this good for everybody, technology? And what do we do about that? And I think this is going to become a more important part of the entire product launch cycle for any of these pieces of technology.
We recently were able to listen to Thomas Friedman's talk about his new book. I wonder if you could mention about Moore's Law and how that might have affected something you did. Technology keeps expanding at this great rate.
Yeah, well, you know, what I'm noticing now that maybe is a corollary to Moore's Law is just the proliferation of artificial intelligence on everything that Google is doing today. Our new CEO, I should say our, he's not there anymore. The new CEO came in and basically said like his edict for the company and his mission and vision for the company is to make everything about artificial intelligence, from understanding more about what you like and what search results we should show to you, to what videos we should show to you, to analyzing data in just incredible ways that we've never been able to do before. And everything now is AI. If in the company, if you don't have a machine learning or AI specialist on your team, you're being asked to find somebody immediately. So I think this is an example of where Moore's Law is playing out, and it's really incredible to see how the entire business is transforming based on AI. So I think this is going to be, for anybody in the audience who has an opportunity to learn this, I would say go be an AI specialist and code. We need more people who know how to code as well. Yes?
If the pill that you take for that, those particles that come onto you and get rid of your cancer, if it's connected to the internet, wouldn't it let off radiation that could cause cancer also?
Great question. And here's where I probably am out of my depth, which is just demonstrates how good a question that is. I have to imagine they've figured out a way to make that without radiation and without that kind of effect, but it's a great question, and I don't know the answer. Yes?
Can you comment a little bit on Pinterest and what the future is? I go on it for recipes and crafts and things, but it seems like you have a much bigger mission.
Yeah, we do. This is a journey that we're on, but I think as you think about the future of search, I contend that your camera is going to be your search engine for certain things in your life, and I think that's a really big ambition for us. I also think that if we can become that backbone of visual recognition technology on images, that becomes a really interesting opportunity for us to basically recognize every image, understand the products that are in that image, and create a business off of that allows people to not shop or use keywords to go find things, but to use images to go find things. And to be able to shop within an image would be something that's really transformational for people across the web. So I think if you and I were to go build a search engine today, we would probably have a lot more than just text, and I think we're betting on the power of images. I do think in the future, as we get to know you more, and this is one of the things about Pinterest, is as you use it more, it gets more knowledgeable about your taste and about what you're interested in. And in the future, I could see a future where you just talk to Pinterest like you do the Echo, and say, hey, I'm going to San Francisco this week, and I want to go to a great restaurant. What do you recommend? And you don't need to go pin pins to boards. We just tell you what to go do based on what we know about you. So that's probably in the future, but something that's very possible. Well, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, John. I hope you will share with your sons and grandsons his 4 messages about, first, the power of why. I think these are great messages. Anything is possible. The idea that diversity is a gift. I also like his message about weird. I think I'm pretty weird, and weird is good. Celebrate failure. I think that's one of the challenges for a school. It's difficult for us to celebrate failure because failure is so much against the philosophy of education, right? But I think it's important to celebrate failure and learn from that and pivot. And then finally, think 10x and not 10%. You really got to do that moonshot thinking. So speaking of moonshot thinking, we have some boys out there who are extraordinary young entrepreneurs in our young entrepreneur market. So as you leave the auditorium, please make a left. They are learning their first lessons about business tonight, and I hope you will open your hearts and open your wallets and support those young men. So safe travels, and thank you for coming.